This is the Wandering Mind.
Welcome everyone to the Wandering Mind. I'm here with Christopher. Hey Christopher, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. I'm looking forward to our conversation as well. I think it's going to be a interesting and maybe inspirational one as well. Um, so to get us started, Christopher, if you just want to introduce yourself to the people, tell us a little bit about your life, your journey, anything you want to say.
Sure. My name's Christopher Grant Ward. I am working full time as a artist in Los Angeles, California. I primarily create aesthetic furniture designed to live in harmony with my clients' homes. I work on commission to build pieces that are designed to bring nature into the home. If you go to my website, christophergrantward.com, you can see samples of my work. I borrow from the shapes and forms found in nature. So insects, plants, animals, flora and fauna. Prior to being an artist, I actually worked in technology in corporate America for almost 15 years. I was a corporate vice president at a number of companies. I had an office in the Empire State Building, and I had a team of 80 people. We were building large e-commerce websites, and I just hated it. It was supposed to be the best job I could have ever hoped for in my career, and I just absolutely hated it. So my wife and I, for a number of reasons, left New York. My biggest reason was that I just didn't wanna do it anymore. We moved to LA, and for the last almost decade now, I've been pursuing a life of art and, also nature. So I live very close to the Sierra Nevadas, which are my place to sort of go home, and we can definitely talk more about that later. I'm an accomplished backpacker and mountaineer. I have hiked a number of the major U.S. trails. Never internationally yet. I want to do that. Italy and Spain and New Zealand,
Yeah.
where you are right now. But uh, I um, I seek out nature um, quite actively because I know that it is good for me in like every sense of that word. So I started a podcast last year called Rebel Nature, and you can find it on my website. But the idea of Rebel Nature is that nature can rewire our brains and change our perception of everyday things. So everything from the way that we see the world, to the way we talk about it through our language, to the inventions that we use to help us navigate the world, like the clock or artificial light, the bicycle. All these things are discussed on my podcast in different episodes from the context that we live in a frame of the modern world that, we almost don't even notice anymore. And yet we all share the experience of wanting to, and sometimes we say, escape or retreat to nature, to find something. And a lot of times we can't even articulate what that is. So in my episodes, I actually kind of call out those contrasts between the modern world and the natural one, and the ways in many cases, the modern world can be detrimental to us if we aren't aware of its effects, and also be aware of what nature sort of intends for us to enjoy and love and appreciate, and what heals us. So, uh, so yeah, so I'm definitely connected with you today because of that podcast, and I think that there's a lot of intersection with, with your podcast, The Wandering Mike, and I definitely think that uh, we'll have a great conversation today for sure. But in the future, I definitely want to keep in touch because a lot of these sentiments are happening in a lot of different podcasts around the world. You're in Germany. I know people in Asia. We should probably compare afterwards. I'll bet there's a whole community starting where people are sort of reconnecting with nature and at the same time realizing modern life's limitations and not necessarily rejecting it, but questioning it a little bit.
Um, Definitely, and the connection with nature definitely is a theme that has been discussed here on our podcast as well a couple of times, and so I'm really looking forward to yeah, getting more into detail about all the things that you just mentioned as well, and just diving deeper into the topic. To start it off, though, I always find it kind of nice to do it in a chronological order. So, um, if you can maybe take us back to that time in your life where, um, like you said, you made that move from New York to Los Angeles, and rather also the move from someone in the corporate world. Maybe for some people they would say, yeah, that's a great job, that is exactly where I want to be, like this would be a great life for me. And then you rejecting this life for a life of more of an artistic purpose, a purpose seeking out nature. So how did that change in your life happen?
Yeah. So, let me just step back maybe just a little bit further.
Mm,
You know, when we're children, um, we don't we have a weird paradox where we have no idea who we are, and yet we have full confidence in who we are. We run and we play. We have no sense of shame or vanity, expectations. In most cases, unless you come from certain childhoods where we would say, "Oh, that's awful that that child grew up in a family like that." And yet, when we become adults, all of that sort of changes, and uh, it's as if we're expected to endure some level of abuse every day, that work is supposed to be something that you don't like and that you're supposed to just get over it. And that working long hours and not enjoying the work you're doing, to be in abusive situations in many corporate cultures, with alcohol and drugs and other things as well, very unhealthy places that people just assume or kind of brush off as, hey, this is adult life. And this is
mhm,
your cross to bear, and this is what we all do. And I think that what I realized after, and I didn't realize it at the time when I had left New York, what I'm realizing more and more now is my return to an artistic life, like you said, or one that sort of looks to nature more, is really also sort of a uh, not a retreat, but a kind of a reconnection with being that child that you sort of had hopes and dreams and thoughts and ideas. So to your point, like it could be that somebody really loves that technology and that corporate environment. And that's actually really not what I'm saying. I'm not really necessarily saying that, working in a certain type of job is negative. It's just that it wasn't for me. And that most people are in some way doing something in their life that isn't for them because they're an adult and they just do what they got to do. And a lot of times we can't avoid that. But whenever we can, whenever we can possibly examine that and say to ourselves, "Hey, is this really how I want to live my life?" Um, I think that deserves some reexamination or some respect as well. Um, and when I talk to people, I talk to lots of people about this. This either kind of resonates in two ways. So, for anyone listening, it's either yes, I absolutely feel that way. I haven't done enough of that, and I really want to hear more about that, Christopher. Or the other people will say, "Man, that's really naive to think that you can just, abandon your responsibilities. I have kids, I have a wife, I have, and to those people who think I'm being naive, thank you, because I actually think, we we need a little bit more of that. I think we go out of our way to very quickly end any sort of thinking that isn't like super pragmatic and super realistic, super cynical type of, model of the world. And I actually believe that the world is suffering to some degree because we've all kind of collectively accepted that. So it's a long way of answering your question, but in short, I sort of am trying to get back to a place that really resonates truly with me. And if we think about it, for most people, being in nature, especially alone, standing at your campsite and looking at the sunrise over some mountains that you didn't maybe even realize you were there because you got to camp late at night and you set up and seeing all of that happen and realizing it happens every day, whether you're there or not, and realizing your true place in the universe, in the cosmos, your small, insignificant place that makes you feel a sigh of relief because you're like, "Oh, I'm actually just part of something way bigger than myself. And in this world, I actually realize who I am." I hope and I would imagine a lot of your listeners understand that feeling and that is why a lot of us go out into nature and go on long distance backpacking and try to get away to find that echo of ourselves that you just cannot hear in the modern world with all of these sirens of responsibility and accountability and messages on all platforms, social media, constantly ringing in our ears. And so that's actually more than art, more than woodworking. That is really my quest, is to pursue that answer for myself, which I may never find, but to really kind of re-explore like who I truly am outside of modern life. And I think that's what I didn't realize then, but what drove me to um, go to LA. Um, not necessarily that LA is even any more
Yeah.
suburban than anywhere else. It's just that there was family there and other things, and California is
Mm.
my home. So yeah, I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but
No, it definitely did. And it also opened another question in my mind, though. So, um, like you said, I feel like it's a very important journey and a journey that a lot of people, if not all people, um, have in their life at some point is trying to figure out who they truly are. Because at the end, we are always surrounded by things, by people, by obligations. But the only thing that we always carry with us is ourselves. So
right.
I do feel like that's a very important question to ask. And like you said as well, a journey that probably never finishes. You might not be at the point where you have all the answers, and that's okay too, because that's what life is. Um,
Right, and you change as well as you go, and I think we also sort of worry too much about not being, like, consistent in our lives, that we should be the same way all the time, and that's not really how
Mm.
we're meant to be. It's okay to like something at one point, like a career, and then not like it anymore and wanna do something else. Like, that's almost, like, not allowed in, this world we built. So,
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a great point as well. It's just um, maybe limiting ourselves by beliefs from around us, and also just things that we did do, like you said. It's like, I've been working here for 15 years. How can I just, throw it away? But yeah, I feel like that's also part of just listening and being true to yourself, because we do
right.
change. And if things change, yeah, we just have to embrace changes.
Yes.
Um, so to the point though, and in this journey of finding oneself, how did you find for yourself that nature is something that can really help in that process, that can aid you in that journey, finding yourself?
Um, well, you know, and I talk a lot about this on my podcast, but as I sort of just write in my journals and examine different aspects of my life, I realized, that a lot of the, I don't know, I'd say, uh, disconcerting or, um, I don't know, incongruous parts of my life were coming from this world that we're in. This, you and I are on some form of Zoom, with microphones and headphones in different countries, about as far apart as you can be in the world, honestly, communicating, and that's all great progress. But with all of that comes so many, I don't know, negatives. Like I was mentioning earlier, like the tyranny of time and the clock, and how
Mm.
every day that you and I and everyone listening, I guarantee, woke up in their head thinking, I woke up on time, I woke up too late, I woke up too
Mm.
early, I didn't get enough sleep, I saved time, I wasted time, I you know, all of these senses of time as a commodity. This is all made up by us and our, through technology, through the clock, and um, this adds an incredible amount of stress to our lives every day that truly doesn't need to exist. We invented credit, we invented all kinds of things that make our world ostensibly run better, but also create either stress or sloth or some sort of kind of uh, problem or situation that's incongruous to the way humans are supposed to be. Even our language, even the words that we use to describe the world, um, keep us from seeing everything all the time. We have names for things. I talk about in one episode the fact that people didn't have a word for blue in any human language, for thousands and thousands of years. And in the Odyssey, we don't even have you don't even see the color blue mentioned in this epic tale that takes place on the ocean under the sky. And instead, Homer
Right.
calls the ocean wine dark. He calls the sky bronze. It's almost as if no one saw the color blue until the Egyptians created a pigment, and then they gave blue a name and they used it to depict their gods. And so artists created the color blue. And it's a long way of getting to the point where it's the fact that we can't even see the world around us unless we use tools like language to experience it. So everything in our life is sort of mediated that way. So, to answer your question, what's the one place that human beings have not designed yet? What is the one place in our society where we can go that hasn't doesn't exist with any of these constructs? And that's the wild places, and it's probably exactly the reason that humans have collectively decided in really only the last 100, 200 years, to preserve for public use these large areas of nature and preserve them because they know we can't help ourselves but to sort of develop and produce and to create commerce out of things. And so we set these places aside because really a synonym for nature is just an undesigned, undeveloped place. And we crave that. And against all of these things that cause me strife and recognizing where they come from, fundamentally, the place that does not have those things is nature. And so by process of elimination and also just knowing myself and loving to hike and loving to pack and loving to explore, and get out by on my own, and experience, you know, any number of beautiful, places, and also the wildlife and the plants. I love biology and zoology and comparative anatomy and, um, uh, experience in those places, gives me this sense of peace, this sense of timelessness. Well, sure, time is passing while you're in a national park, but if you're doing it right, you don't realize it or experience it the same way. You are there with as few inventions as possible. Hopefully, I know we've started to bring our phones and our solar panels and other things into headphones, and do what you want. But we're there in as unmediated an experience as possible with a place that is designed wholly not for us, that cares not whether we're there or not. Um, and the magic of it is for us to experience, um, and uh, kind of sort of work through in our own heads, because everything else that we're used to is built for us, like little ant hills all over the world. And so, I think that getting to those places as much as possible, like we were talking about at the beginning, helps you to really realize like who you are fundamentally without all these things. What if I didn't have any language? What if I didn't have any time? What if I didn't have a car or a bike or um, uh, I don't know, potato chips? Like what if I didn't have these things? Like who would I be? Would I still crave salt? Would I still have, some sense of panic that it was 9 a.m.? Would I still, and I mean, obviously, like I'm rhetorically, like the answer is no to most of that. And so, it's telling that we try to escape as much as possible on our vacations and our holidays and whenever we can to these natural wild places. There was a quote that and then I'll shut up, but there was this quote I heard, and I forget who said it. I never remember. And I think many people have said it, but it goes something like, we could have all chosen as humans to just skinny dip and eat apples, but instead we invented mortgages. And to me, that's this sense of like, we can't help ourselves. We have everything we need, and yet we create things that will cause stress and problems and inequality and famine and all of this. And so, yeah, it just kind of is the logical conclusion after a lifetime of searching that nature kind of is this source of healing or reconnection.
So, um, I mean, the good thing is that I love listen to everything you're saying. The bad thing is that I could ask so many different questions. because all these things are equally interesting. Um, so I'll just park all my other questions in the back of my mind for now because I do want to get into all these things that you mentioned about the frame of the modern world, and I do want to like touch on that a little bit more as well. But since we still are talking about nature, I also want to go into a little bit more detail as well about your personal passion that you said you had for backpacking, just for flora and fauna, and
Yeah.
um, what we can also just learn from like being in nature and watching all these types of plants, of animals, and so yeah. What's the excitement there for you?
Um, I mean, there's a lot of uh lessons, that you can get from being outside in nature. There's a lot of things you can learn about yourself, as we've talked about. Uh, y- y- I think when you realize, and like I was mentioning before, when you realize that you are in a place that every day the sun is shining on these trees and this mountaintop, and this marmot is running around these rocks and doing its thing while we're down here in the cities doing what we're doing. This is happening every day. That realization, I think, is common to lots of people. They'll get out and this is actually a way of life that has no idea about what we're doing. We're not important to it at all. And I think, just to reiterate, I think that sense of um, I insignificance is the word that comes to mind, but it's really just a sense of like uh, you know, being part of a bigger world or bigger system. That realization is actually really calming to me. Um, and as I hike and I look and I watch, um, I find that that is a very sort of peaceful, meditative moment that can last for as long as I'm out there. And to that point, we are not designed as human beings to receive so much like signal, density as we do from, again, all of these electronic devices, from the artificial light disrupting our circadian rhythms. And when you're out in nature, you're getting some sort of stimuli, and it's somewhat passive. I mean, unless there's a bear or something, it's really not, pretty benign. And it is something that we're actually not used to. And I know I've heard some people, like I was mentioning, they have headphones or stuff because they'll have this like overwhelming sense of boredom because they're just sort of there with nothing. Um, And I encourage people to, like, if you can get through that, kinda like getting through your first run, after you haven't run in a while, or your first day of not eating sugar or whatever it is. Like, if you can get through that uncomfortable feeling, there's actually this real sense of, like, I don't know, lack of busyness, right? Lack of that is out there that we need. I don't know about you. I don't know. I actually never we haven't talked about your, like, hiking experience, but I assume you've hiked for a number of days at a time, being out in nature for a while. Yes? Is that
Yes,
true?
I've
Yeah.
done a couple of multi-day hikes in my life.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and so go ahead.
no, I actually just recently. did one here, in the town I'm staying in
Mm,
at the moment, Queenstown, New Zealand,
yeah.
and I did the Milford Track, which,
Oh, wow. Yep.
arguably, is considered one of the, I think the marketing says, the finest walk on earth. Um, but no, it's like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was still like this it's just such a good experience, to get away from it all, not have any signal on your
Yeah.
phone and just be in nature and enjoy it.
Have Did you notice at all, like, a sense of time, like, dilating slower? That Do you get that feeling? I've talked to some people, and I know I've had it myself where, like, a day feels like it went by in a flash and also an eternity. Like, you could be out for 3 or 4 days, but 3 or 4 days hiking could almost feel like a couple weeks, just in the sense of the amount of data you can actually process in your head and the amount of memories you can create compared to modern life. It just feels longer and richer, right? And at least this is my experience of being out in nature. That I'm able to process more cleanly everything that I'm seeing and everything that I am bringing with me out there from, like, that's happened to me that I need to work through, and that all of those things happen in uh, a much more deliberate way than when I'm in the modern life and I'm moving really quick and I'm driving and I got on the phone, I check the phone, do the text, everything's sort of cached in my RAM, and I'm just kind of moving as quick as I can, and then go to bed and you wake up and it starts all over again. And out when I'm, doing some long distance backpacking, that time, like, it all slows down in this very peaceful way that, I can't get enough of. And then the moment I get back, I realize how fast and, loud everything is, back at the parking lot. I don't know if that's your experience or not, but that's mine.
No, I definitely, feel that as well. It's definitely way more intentional, and it's yeah, I would say it's like you definitely make more of your time, but maybe sometimes it even feels like time passed quicker in the sense of that you're just at a river, or you're just like
Right.
sitting somewhere and you're just enjoying it so much, and then you're like, oh, this was 3 hours. I just sat here for 3 hours and took in everything around me.
Yeah.
So it is definitely way more intentional, and you're basically like you're way more in the moment, and like
Mhm.
realizing things way more, and you're, like you said, to your point, not rushing through them, but really like taking them in, and yeah, exploring them.
Yeah. Yeah, and, I think, what you're referring to, can also be described in, like, in terms of, like, a brainwave state where, like, we spend most of our life in, think I'm gonna Google it real quick, make sure I get so, like, I think we're in normally in, like, the modern life, we're in sort of like a beta wave state when we're awake, which is, like, very active and processing and solving and, interacting and sorting and sifting data and all of those things. And, if you meditate, or you, drink some green tea, there's some ways to get there. You can get to this alpha wave state, which is more like what a lot of people would say, like your
Mm.
flow state, where you're sort of just enjoying yourself so much that you don't even realize where the time went. I get like that when I do woodworking sometimes, and my wife will
Mhm.
come out and it's like 5 hours later. She's like, "Where, you gotta stop. You got
Wow.
whatever it is, or painting, or creating, programming for some people I know, like some really good programmers that I know, they love to just get into it and they'll just zone out of everything else in this like very enjoyable way. And I think what you're talking about is kind of the same thing where you get to this place where you're just so, in love with the scene that you're experiencing that you sort of, you know, again, lose this beta wave sense of, like, time passing, and I think you're right. I think it's this weird, uh, it's 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 a binary or, it's both at the same time, a very, long-lasting, enduring,
Yeah.
time span, but also one that, you can go by very, in some sense quickly, um, uh, while you're experiencing it. But, like, I guess what I meant was maybe, like, when I get back home, I feel like I've been gone for weeks when it's only been a few days.
Mhm.
Just because the pace of life here is so much faster. So yeah, you can tell something's happening, right? I think it's interesting that like two people like us that have been out there a lot still struggle to kind of explain it, but you can tell there's something unusual, magical, different happening to you as you kind of transition between these two places. That's actually happening inside as much as it's happening outside.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that the very first thing, or my very first reaction, when I came back to the more civilized world, and the first thing that happened was my phone vibrated in my pocket, and that was just sadness. I was like, "Oh no, I'm back." you know, now I'm
Yeah.
back into this world, and yeah, to your point, I was like, I wish I could be back in that stage, in the nature
Yeah.
state again.
Yeah. My experience like that, I've done the John Muir Trail a number of times, which would be the other trail. What's like the one you just mentioned in New Zealand. What
Yeah,
was that one what'd you
the
say?
the
The
Milford track.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but, I'll be out there, I don't know, 8 or 9 days doing that or 10 days, and, when you get to the parking lot, you actually kind of come down a mountain in the parking lot out of Mount Whitney, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, it's happened every time, and I forget, that it's gonna happen, but then all of a sudden you see this weird, bright color that's, like, very distracting, and you realize it's a car. And
Hmm.
it's, like, through the trees, the parking lot's kinda, like, down there, and so but you've seen this, like, palette of very natural, understandable colors, the whole time you're out there. Even a cardinal, isn't as red as, like, a bright red, Ford Fiesta or
Hmm.
whatever. Like, you see these colors, and they're just, like, not what you've been used to, and it just is very, I don't know, jarring. Like you said, like your phone buzzing. It's a very jarring,
Yeah.
sense of things that you're not used to because you've been, again, in this very undesigned place, and when those things clash, you can really there's that moment where you can feel the clash of that. It's almost like a wave splashing over you. It's sort of you realize where you were and where you are in that moment. So yeah, it's definitely an unsettling kind of reentry. I agree.
Um, yeah, maybe to take the stories that we just talked about, to make the connection with some of the things I wanted to touch on a little bit more that you mentioned about our modern design as well. So
Yeah,
I guess the first and very apparent thing has to be time because, like we discussed, in nature, um, obviously, yeah. Nowadays, we do have our phones with us, or at least I do. So we always kind of have the choice to look at the time. But if we didn't have that, I feel like sometimes there is no way to tell. Like, have I stood here? Have I looked up at this tree for 10 minutes or half an hour?
Mhm.
I don't know. And yet we get so much out of just being in the moment and just like being together with nature. So,
Yeah.
um, I guess the question kind of is, what really is the value of time? And as you've mentioned with the clock as well,
Mhm.
is that the correct way to value time and seconds and minutes and like yeah, yeah, just what do you think about the whole concept?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to talk about it too, because to go to go hike, in nature, to kind of plan, where you're gonna camp and such, you don't need a very fine resolution of time, like, you can learn pretty quickly, the skills we had even 300-400 years ago to just tell by the sun and our latitude, more or less, when it's gonna be morning, when it's gonna be night, when it's sort of midday, um, how to learn and gauge that by a number of things and kind of get a natural organic feeling of how fast you're moving. Um, Certainly you can use a watch and other things to do that, but you don't need it. So to answer your question, like the value of time and the way that we understand it in modern life, um, you know, the clock was invented, first in um, you know, uh, put in, it was installed in like a church in the town square, and people
Yeah.
could sort of kind of generally understand the way a day was passing. But before they had that, they were just sort of like, it's morning, it's midday, it's nighttime. I'll meet you at nighttime over here at this, wherever we're
Right.
going. I'll meet you in the morning for work. I'll meet you. Like, there were all kinds of metaphorical ways to know when and where we should do things. But to be more efficient, and this is the key word, we needed ways socially, same way that we have a social sense of language, the way that you and I are both speaking English before we never met each other before, but we came with this set of codes that we can use to interact with. The clock does the same thing, where we all understand what an hour is and what a day is and what a second is, and we know what time it is. And since we have this shared social understanding, and then it became portable, and it was actually something that you could carry with you. It started to be this piece of information that actually turned into sort of like a resource or a commodity that we could trade and share and sell um, and save and waste. Um, and the efficiency with which we, needed to have time work has grown as we go. We used to be able to measure, time, with a sundial, and then we needed like a wound clock, and then nowadays, as I'm sure you know, like we have the atomic clock, which is just
Yeah.
measuring the half life of cesium, I think, and like it's accurate to like uh, a second variation over 100 million years, like so that GPS can be hyper accurate with everything that it does. So clocks are really this like way to like accurately and efficiently slice our lives as much as possible into these micro fragments that are fungible, that can be exchanged for things like money or favors or
Yeah.
interactions. Like we're here in my world from 3:30 to it's like 5:30. This is this slice, and this is for you. Um, that doesn't You don't need that in nature. And I'm not saying that the clock is wholly bad. Like it's just that we don't even think about it anymore. So now The part that I don't like is when, like, the clock is governing me and it's telling me that it's dinner time instead of me thinking to myself in my body, "Am I hungry?" Or that, you know, um, a dishwasher can save me time, uh, so I can do other things, but then what do we do with that time most of the time, and I'm guilty of this too, is wasted on other things that we wouldn't have done anyway, and now we're not taking that time maybe as a husband, wife, and family to wash the dishes together and interact or whatever it is, right?
Uh,
Whatever it is that we lose through that. And again, there's going to be two camps. There's going to be a group of people that are going to be like, "Yeah, that makes sense, Christopher," and another group of people are like, "Yeah, I have 4 kids. We don't have time to wash the dishes together. Get real." And I understand that, and I'm not again saying that the clock is something we should abandon as much as just be aware of like what's happening when we're like running on a schedule and we're moving from, meeting to meeting or call to call. That aware even just having that awareness is important enough. And so yeah, when you're out in nature, you don't need that. And I think that that's refreshing. To be in a situation where, unlike other ways you can spend your holiday, um, that require, pretty good synchronization with the clock, like, I don't know, going to Disneyland is
mm,
a highly time regulated experience. Like, you actually get these tickets now, and you have to return at a certain time to get
mm.
on the ride. Like, you're grabbing and trading time, like, literally with these paper tickets. Um, so an experience like that compared to one of, like, hiking in the woods where in sometime in the next 4 or 5 hours, we need to make a camp, and it can be wherever we'd like. Yeah, there's some sense of needing to make this before it's nighttime and we can't see, but we don't really have that sense of a schedule, and I think that we crave home, and I think that's the number one thing people are looking to avoid, when they get out into nature is losing that sense of a scheduled life that the clock more or less is responsible for it.
Yeah, and, um, yeah, I don't wanna spend too much time on the topic of time,
Yeah, yeah.
but,
Yeah,
actually,
funny.
um,
Yeah.
I just thought about something, else as well, though, because when I did my hike, obviously I was already into like this podcasting thing that I started the middle of the year. And before I did, like a lot of thoughts in my head was like, can you just abandon it for a week? Like what will happen? Like can you um like how can you just not work on it for a week and go out in nature? And the funny thing I just want to say is as soon as I've been in nature, like none of these thoughts have been in my head. Like as soon as I was in the experience, I never thought about it um, again. And once I was
Right.
back, obviously nothing has changed. Like I'm not that important as to me being away for a week or two would change anything at all. And I just pick right back up. So I feel like
Yeah. No,
it's yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
it's just all about perspective. Sometimes we think, especially if we're into something and we do it every day, it's like, how can I get away from it? But once you get away from it, you don't even think about it anymore. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, I know, and I think that that's probably maybe the big lesson here, right? Is that, in whatever your environment you're in, it's hard to it's hard to see anything else. It's hard to
Yeah.
realize that there's any other way of being, and that it goes just as true for being in a wild, a natural place as it does being in a modern design place. It's really hard in either situation to really, you know, unless you really work at it to understand the effect that everything is having on you. Um, and that's why I always kind of try to start with, how am I feeling, whether I can explain it or not. Like, am I feeling stressed or happy or good or uneasy or having negative thoughts about like my work or my accomplishments or all those things that people have, those what we consider to be like the human condition, the sense of guilt or disappointment, those things, you know I it's hard to be guilty in nature. It's hard to be vain in nature. It's hard to be disappointed in nature. You can be uncomfortable. You can be too cold and you can get wet socks. You can certainly
Right.
be uncomfortable, but some of those emotions, or emotional states, aren't things that you can really experience. Even like evil or good, like that doesn't really exist in nature either. Like there's predators, sure, and there's dangerous animals, and there's harsh conditions, but there isn't any sort of malice in nature. There isn't like a sense of if you look at the animal kingdom, it's really only humans and maybe orcas that have some sense of uh, you know, sadism or like enjoyment, the enjoyment in like, harming another creature, like by and large, except for humans and orcas, uh, and maybe I think chimpanzees sometimes, other animals don't do that. And life isn't like that. Like by and large in the world, that is not the normal, I guess I would say, or usual way things are. So a lot of that, you think about it, is really coming from the world. But yeah, you don't realize it all the time, and it takes a lot of mental energy to kind of do it all the time. So mm, that's what your podcast is for, I think. My podcast is to spend a little time thinking about these things that are affecting us and just giving people a chance to check in with that part of themselves that we all have, this natural human side that is seeking some sense of solace from uh, some of these stressors in our lives.
Yeah, I feel like that that's a great point. And to sum up the things that you have already said as well, it's also not to say a clock is bad or good, or artificial light is bad or good. There's things that we invented these things for, and they kind of came out of a reasoning that might be good to a certain cause. Um, but yeah, just like we said, if we have these experiences in nature, away from these things, and kind of observe what thoughts we have and what thoughts maybe we also don't have, um, like you've said, it's just always nice to have this awareness and not just be like saying we cannot think about these things because they are just a given, but even though we have been establishing them in our modern world, we can still think about and actively be aware of how these things basically I don't know if dictate's the right word, but in a sense, dictate what we do. Because you also mentioned language, which I found super interesting, which obviously is a great way of us for us to communicate and helps us in that way to communicate. But it also limits the way we communicate because
Yes.
it does put words to things rather than just a thing. So um, yeah, I feel like just in general, being aware and thinking about everything that we do that might seem like yeah, that's just the way it is. I feel like it's always important to think, but what does it actually influence? How does it actually influence us as a person and a human?
Yeah, absolutely, and I couldn't have said it any better myself. That's I think that what you said is right on. I would never we're talking on Zoom. I'm wearing a watch. It's Monday. It's time to get some things done. I'm obviously not some, monk that's outside of the system, or, wholly abandoning it. It's just that if you look at inventions throughout history, most of them had good intentions. Most of them had really good intentions. Um, even the clock was just meant to sort of help us self coordinate and coordinate socially, and just a natural extension of how people were doing things. It's just, I think you're right. The awareness is maybe what's missing, and even just having the awareness itself helps you to sort of find that balance and that separation from it.
Maybe let's, because I always like to just fantasize as well, because as we've heard in our conversation as well, obviously there's people that say, yeah, how can you be so naive? That's just how things are. But I love to romanticize about things, and I love to um, think of an ideal. Um, so, and can you at all in your head imagine like a world where we, and like you have put it, are just skinny dipping and enjoying us being on this planet in this universe, and not having this one person come up with, oh, but if I sell this for money and then I can hire someone to give him this money that he can do something for me. Um, do, do you feel like a world like this is possible?
um, you mean in like some utopia where
Yeah, just we're at the beginning of everything. We're not thinking about efficiency. We didn't invent money yet. Or is that just the way it is supposed to go? Like, is that just where we ended, like we're wired
well,
to end up in?
I mean, like, I don't wanna be super negative, at all, but, like, I think I think the answer is yes, we could find some of that again. I think it would require some, and I mean, like, major change in the way the world works, like a lack of oil and electricity, and, like,
Yeah.
there would have to be some major disconnect from that, because our sense of power, um, and control, and is tied to a lot of systems that um, we're not prepared to let go of. Um, but you see it happen in small ways. So, like, let's not go real super negative, like apocalyptic, whatever. But, like, you see it happen in small ways, with like COVID, and the world sort of
Mm.
shut down. And I don't know if anyone, I come from corporate America, and, I know a lot of people who are in that world, still. Um, and you see, even in 4 years, all of a sudden, the top companies in the world are like, "Oh, yeah, everyone can work from home." And actually,
Right.
it works better. It works better, they make more money, it's more profitable. The companies that are the smartest are moving ahead and saying, "Now we don't have to pay for leases, we don't have to, uh, force you to, drive your cars around this." I live in Los Angeles, creating pollution, traffic, wasting your time, all of these things, that are better for everyone in the world, happened just because of uh virus. Um, and now you see a number of companies trying to pull everyone back into the office with a bunch of, you know, you know, I don't know, not very authentic, genuine reasons. So, they just want control. They just want everyone back. They don't have a good explanation for why. The real explanation is the shareholders and the leases that they have on the places and the management structures that want to just observe people in their seats doing work, these dinosaur ways of doing things. It will never be the same. It will never go back to the way it was where everyone felt required to go into the office. There will now always be companies that are cheating that. Iceland just moved to a 4-day work week. They were already threatening to before um, COVID, and now just kind of moved to it. So you see these things happen where something changes in the world that's monumental enough that we have to rethink what the home is and what the office and the workplace is, and what it means to commute, and all of these, like you said, givens that all of a sudden aren't anymore. Um, and speaking of COVID, what's the one place that we were actually able to congregate to some degree? It was outside. All of a sudden, outside was
Right.
safer than inside. For millennia, the house was supposed to be this shelter from the great outdoors, and now we're finding that nature was the safest place to be. And I know there were different times where that was true and untrue, and you had to have masks and so forth, and you did have to have masks. I don't know, like that. I'm on that side. You had to do all the things, but look, I think that that's a great example of the way that the world could change. Um, and I don't think that's as monumental as what you were suggesting. I think I think we have to look really hard at like what is causing some of these major fundamental problems. Why do some people have so much and some people have so little? And this is way off the context of your podcast to talk about, economic models and capitalism and all of these things. But if you're looking to nature as a guide for the way things should be, and you're looking to nature as the sort of source for what we're hardwired to love and enjoy, and you look at the way nature works most of the time, most social situations for animals, most of the collective agreements among ecosystems to work in harmony together, to make sure everything is taken care of, to make sure that the work that you're doing is serving somebody else and that the work they're doing is serving you. If you look to nature for those models, you realize that the answers are there, but we've chosen to go a different way. So I I would hope that we could find that someday, but I do think it would take something extremely monumental for us to take a moment to rethink that, just because we're going at such a fast pace and the momentum is already there. It's gonna take something much greater than COVID to stop it.
Yeah. I do think that that's a very hopeful and positive insight, though, just to uh, remember that it is possible, even though it is obviously becoming more and more difficult because like these things are established, they quote unquote like work really well on some scale. So um but yeah, just these givens like, yeah, Saturday and Sunday are the days to rest, to then say, oh no, we do a 4-hour work week. And like we can change these things, like
Yeah.
things and there's things that none of us probably think about, that someone might just go ahead and let's try this and maybe it catches on.
Right.
So it is that there is hope to it. And like you mentioned as well, the way nature does it, which I feel like humans are also more and more, at least people that I speak with as well, are on that track of, yes,
Yeah.
we need to work together. It doesn't help if I put somebody down. No, I need to lift everyone up around me because that lifts me up as well. And just um, living through that and living with that kind of sense, we are all here to lift each other up and help each other and not exploit each other or stuff like that. So if
Right.
that's the way we go forward, yeah, um, maybe things can change in a positive way.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's a great message to have, and I'm glad that you articulated it so well.
Um, that that actually um, also is kind of a good transition to a question that I always tend to ask near the ending of the episode. So we talked a lot about you, a lot of your insights, and we basically have by now a very good picture of who you are and how you think and how you perceive life as well. So I always like to do a little bit of an outlook into the future. So um, what are currently some dreams and aspirations that you have? What are things that you are looking to achieve? What are things you're aiming for? Yeah, what are the things you put your energy towards in the future?
Well, this year I'm focused primarily on 3 things. One is the Rebel Nature podcast, growing, the audience, for the purposes of just sending the message, of, like, consideration and thoughtfulness about where we are in the world and the way nature can help us. So I'm really focused on that, and one of the ways I'm doing this is talking to other like-minded thought leaders like you, and also bringing them onto my show, which I'm certainly gonna have you on my show sometime this year to have a similar conversation in reverse. Um,
That's
but you know, really kind of elevating these ideas as much as I can is one of my primary missions, and the other, is, professionally to just continue my work, my furniture pieces, and, continuing to, find the clients around the world that are interested in this idea of handmade asymmetrical work, one of a kind pieces, as if they came from nature themselves itself, because they are, again, one of a kind, made all from natural materials, natural finishes, non toxic materials, and also sort of bringing the outside in any way that I can, to sort of disrupt the idea of the home. It's a really important thought to me as an artist. So I'm continuing to do that this year. And then I think personally, I am spending a lot more time, um, as we've talked about, just thinking intentionally about what I do, what I eat, how I exercise, um, whenever I can, using science and scientific literature to back up my choices, for how I live my day to day life when I rest, finding peace and relaxation. Um, I haven't done a good job over the majority of my life, um, enjoying my life. I've spent a lot of my life accomplishing things and succeeding at things, in the worst sense of the word. Following paths and dreams that weren't necessarily mine, and And so I'm really taking some time this year to, I guess, slow down and think about what I do every day, and who I spend time with. And I feel really honored to spend time with you and your audience today. This was a really important uh, part of my day that I was looking forward to, and to really put my time and energy into those things. So those would be the three things that I'm hoping for this year.
Um, yeah, these are beautiful things, and especially the last one again. I feel like it's just so important to always share with people as well, and basically um, just um, being humble enough to realize that all of us, and that's what I think we are also trying to portray through these conversations, that we are always willing to learn and we are always on this journey. And um, because the worst thing one could do is say, I know it all. Because if you have that
Right.
mindset, you will never improve, you will never learn. And um, yeah, so that really resonated with me on your personal
Mhm.
front, to just keep learning and trying to um, yeah, be a student of everything that happens to us, of everyone that we interact with. And um, yeah, that's a great way for your life to just come into fruition.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, so yeah, I feel like we have covered a lot of interesting things, and we've come to a great point to wrap it up here. So I also want to say I really appreciated your time, Christopher. I really enjoyed our conversation. And we also touched on some things where people can find you, but I also always want to give the person at the end the time to again tell us where can we find you online if these things resonated with people. And I obviously put everything in the description as well so you can find it easily. But yeah, where can people find your work, your output, anything at all?
Yeah, so my website, my name is Christopher Grant Ward. My website is the same, christophergrantward.com. My Instagram is Christopher Grant Ward, so at Christopher Grant Ward. And the podcast is called Rebel Nature. It's available on Spotify, Apple, anywhere that you can listen to podcasts, as well as YouTube. You can also get to my podcast through my website. There's a link there to the podcast page. So any of those channels would be a great place to connect with me. As well, you can always send me an email to hello@christophergrantward.com. And I'd love to chat about any topics about nature or art at any time. I actually talk to people around the world every week. So it's a really enjoyable part of my day.
Very nice. So yeah, I appreciate you, Christopher. Thank you for sharing all that with
Thank you.
us.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening, day where you are.
Evening. Yeah, no,
Evening.
it's just become it's sun is setting, yeah, it's yeah. Mhm. Yep.
Perfect. And with that, goodbye, everyone.
Alright, take care.